The two brothers had been on the run for months, hiding out in the backcountry near the Red River Valley in Indian Territory. Every deputy marshal who'd gone after them had come back empty-handed. The brothers knew the land too well, had too many friends willing to hide them, and their mother's farmhouse was a fortress that no lawman could penetrate without getting shot to pieces before reaching the front door. Bass Reeves studied the situation and came to a simple conclusion. If he rode up to that house as a deputy marshal, he'd be dead before his boots hit the ground. So he decided not to ride up as a deputy marshal at all. He left his posse 28 miles away, camped in a grove of cottonwood trees with instructions to wait for his signal. Then Bass did something that would become legendary among the outlaws and lawmen of Indian Territory. He became someone else entirely. He took off his badge and hid it in his saddlebag. He stripped off his fine deputy marshal's coat and put on the rattiest, most threadbare clothes he could find. He took his best hat, a fine Stetson that had cost him a month's wages, and shot 3 holes through the crown with his Colt .45. He found an old walking stick and practiced limping with it until the limp looked natural, like a man with a genuine injury trying to make miles on foot. Then Bass Reeves, the most feared lawman in the territory, started walking. 28 miles. In torn shoes that rubbed blisters on his feet, carrying nothing but that bullet-riddled hat and that walking stick, looking for all the world like a desperate fugitive who'd barely escaped with his life. The sun beat down mercilessly as he walked. His feet screamed with every step, but Bass kept moving, kept limping, kept playing the role he'd assigned himself. Because that's what it took sometimes. You couldn't just be a lawman. You had to be an actor, a chameleon, whatever the job required. By the time he reached the mother's farmhouse, the sun was setting, and Bass looked exactly like what he was pretending to be. A man at the end of his rope, hungry and desperate and scared. He knocked on the door with the end of his walking stick. The old woman who answered was gray-haired and suspicious, her eyes narrowing as she took in the stranger on her porch. But Bass had his story ready, and he told it with the kind of detail that only comes from living it for the past day and a half. "Ma'am," he said, his voice hoarse and tired, "I know I look like trouble and I'm sorry to bother you. But there's a posse after me. They shot at me for near about 5 miles. You can see the bullet holes in my hat. My feet are tore up something awful and I haven't eaten since yesterday morning. I don't mean you no harm. I just need a bite of food and maybe a place to rest for a few hours before I move on." The woman looked at the hat, at the 3 clean bullet holes punched through the crown. She looked at his feet, at the way he was favoring his left leg. And something in her face softened. "I suppose you'd better come in," she said. "I can't turn a man away when he's hurting, even if he is running from the law." Bass limped inside, making sure to wince with each step. The woman brought him a plate of cornbread and beans, a cup of water. As he ate, she sat across from him and started talking, the way lonely people do when they finally have someone to talk to. "My own boys are in trouble with the law," she said quietly. "Been on the run for months now. I worry about them, something terrible. They're good boys, really, just fell in with bad companions and made some mistakes." Bass nodded sympathetically, his face a mask of understanding. "Yes, ma'am, I know how that goes. The law don't always see the whole picture. Sometimes a man just needs a fresh start." The woman's eyes lit up. "That's exactly right. That's what I keep telling them. They just need a chance to start over somewhere new." She paused, studying Bass's face. "You know, my boys come by here sometimes, late at night. They hide out in the barn until things cool down. Maybe when they come tonight, you all could travel together. There's safety in numbers." Bass felt his heart rate quicken, but kept his expression neutral. "That's mighty kind of you, ma'am. I'd appreciate the company. When do you expect them?" "Oh, they'll be here around sundown. They always whistle from the tree line. 3 short whistles, so I know it's them and not trouble. She smiled. I'll whistle back so they know it's safe to come in. As darkness fell, Bass sat in the small farmhouse and made small talk with the woman, all while his mind was racing through the details of what would happen next. He'd removed his handcuffs from his pack earlier and hidden them under his coat. His pistol was tucked in the back of his waistband, concealed but accessible. He was unarmed as far as the woman knew, just another fugitive looking for a safe place to rest. Then, just as full dark settled over the prairie, Bass heard it. 3 short whistles from somewhere in the trees. The woman stood up, walked to the door, and whistled back. 3 short notes that carried across the yard. Bass stood too, stretching like a man working the kinks out of tired muscles. Your boys? He asked. Yes, the woman said, smiling with relief. They're here. You'll like them. They're good boys. 2 riders emerged from the darkness, approaching the house cautiously. Bass could see the way they sat their horses, the way their hands stayed near their gun belts. These weren't farmers or cowboys. These were men who expected trouble and were ready for it. The woman opened the door and called out, It's all right, boys. I got someone here you should meet. He's running from the law, too. Maybe you all can help each other out. The brothers dismounted and walked toward the house, their spurs jingling in the quiet night. They were young men, maybe in their 20s, with hard eyes that had seen too much too soon. Bass stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the lamplight from inside, playing his part perfectly. Evening, he said. Your mama's been real kind to me. I appreciate the hospitality. The brothers relaxed slightly. If their mother trusted this stranger, he couldn't be too dangerous. They came inside, accepted plates of food, and sat down at the table with Bass. For the next hour, they talked like old friends, swapping stories about close calls with the law, comparing notes on which marshals to avoid and which territories were safe. Bass made up elaborate tales of his own fictional crimes, and the brothers laughed and nodded and added their own real stories to the mix. It was almost midnight when the older brother suggested they all get some sleep. We got a long ride tomorrow, he said, heading up toward the Cherokee Nation. You're welcome to ride with us if you want. Bass agreed enthusiastically. I'd be grateful for the company. Though I got to tell you, after that walk today, I'm about dead on my feet. Mind if we all bunk in the same room? That way, if trouble comes, we can watch each other's backs. The brothers thought this was a fine idea. They spread their bedrolls on the floor of the small back room while their mother bid them good night and retired to her own bed. Bass laid out his own blanket between the 2 brothers, making sure he was positioned perfectly. The 3 men settled down. The lamplight flickered and went out, and soon the sounds of deep breathing filled the room. Bass waited. He counted to 1,000 in his head, making sure both men were truly asleep. Then, moving with the silence of a hunting cat, he reached under his coat and pulled out the handcuffs. The iron was cold in his hands as he incrementally carefully, opened the cuffs to their widest position. The older brother was on his left, sleeping on his back with one arm thrown over his eyes. Bass moved like smoke, like shadow, like something that wasn't quite real. He slipped one cuff around the brother's left wrist and clicked it shut with barely a sound. Before the man could even register what was happening, Bass had threaded the chain through the iron bed frame and snapped the other cuff around the younger brother's right wrist. Then Bass stood up, his pistol suddenly in his hand, and kicked both men hard in the ribs. "Get up," he said in a voice that was no longer tired or desperate. It was the voice of Bass Reeves, Deputy U.S. Marshal, and it carried the weight of absolute authority. "You're under arrest." The brothers came awake in a confused tangle, trying to reach for guns that Bass had already taken while they slept, trying to stand but finding themselves chained together and chained to the bed frame. In the lamplight that Bass had now relit, they could see the badge on his chest, the gun in his hand, the cold certainty in his eyes. "You sons of—" the older brother started, but Bass cut him off. "Save it. You got the right to remain silent on the way to Fort Smith, and I suggest you use it." The commotion woke the mother. She came running in her nightgown, took one look at the scene, her boys in chains, the stranger now wearing a deputy marshal's badge, and let out a scream that could have curdled milk. "You lying snake!" she shrieked. "You sat at my table. You ate my food. You lied to me." Bass was already marching the brothers out the door, their chains rattling. "Ma'am, I'm sorry for the deception, but your boys are wanted for horse theft and robbery. I'm taking them to Fort Smith to stand trial." The woman followed them out into the yard, her voice rising to a wail. "You're a devil in disguise. I curse you, Bass Reeves. I curse your name." Bass got the brothers mounted on their horses, chained together so neither could make a break for it. Then he started the long walk back to where his posse was camped, 28 miles away through the darkness. And the mother followed. For the first 3 miles, she walked behind them, never stopping, never slowing, her voice hoarse from screaming curses and accusations. Bass just kept walking, leading the horses, ignoring the torrent of words that followed him through the night. Eventually, her voice gave out, or her feet gave out, or her rage burned itself to ash. She stopped in the middle of the road, a small figure silhouetted against the stars, and watched as Bass Reeves disappeared into the darkness with her sons. When Bass finally reached his posse's camp as the sun was rising, he had 2 prisoners, blistered feet, and a story that would be told and retold for the next 50 years. His men stared at him in amazement, covered in dust, limping for real now, but with 2 of the most wanted men in the territory in chains. "How in the hell did you do it?" one of them asked. Bass just smiled, collected his $5,000 reward, and said what he always said. "Sometimes you gotta become what they expect to see." They expected a fugitive, so that's what I gave them. The 2 brothers went to Fort Smith, stood trial before Judge Parker, and were convicted. Their mother never forgave Bass Reeves, but she told the story herself in later years, shaking her head in grudging admiration. "He fooled me completely," she'd say. "Sat at my table, ate my food, looked me right in the eye and lied like he was born to it. I cursed him for 3 miles and meant every word. But I'll tell you this. That man earned his reputation. He earned every bit of it." Bass Reeves never apologized for the deception. In his mind, he'd done exactly what the job required. Whatever it took to bring outlaws to justice without anyone getting killed. If that meant walking 28 miles in torn shoes and lying to a lonely old woman, then that's what he'd do. Because at the end of the day, those 2 brothers would have shot any lawman who rode up to that house wearing a badge. But they'd welcomed a fellow fugitive with open arms, never suspecting that the man they were sharing their plans with was the same deputy marshal who'd been hunting them for months. It was genius. It was ruthless. It was Bass Reeves doing what he did better than anyone else in the history of the American frontier, becoming whoever he needed to be to get the job done.